More than 100 days of war in Ukraine, and the battles are intensifying. Ukraine's losses have been severe. Since invading, Russia has occupied a fifth of the country and is pounding the eastern Donbass, which it seems determined to occupy. How long can Kiev rely on Western arms and ammunition? Who can it really trust? My guest this week from Brussels is Liubov Tsybulska, advisor to Ukraine's armed forces. Along with her government, she's been angered by President Macron's phone calls with Vladimir Putin and his warning not to humiliate the Russians.
It's not diplomacy to call the war criminal. It's not diplomacy after everything what Russian forces committed in Ukraine. So I do not think that calling or suggesting not to humiliate Putin is an option at all.
So does Ukraine fear a Western sellout or a deal being done behind its back? Just how critical is the current military situation? And do Ukrainians still believe in the ultimate victory that President Zelensky is promising? And when the guns fall silent, will Russia ever be held to account for the lives it's taken and the country it's broken? All that and more on Conflict Zone. Liubov Tsybulska, welcome to Conflict Zone. After more than 100 days of fighting, your president is as determined as ever to secure victory. The only question, he says, is how much your people will have to pay for it, to pay for their freedom. How much more are you and the people of Ukraine prepared to pay for that freedom?
Freedom is the highest value for us, and we are ready to pay as much as it's needed, especially after all losses, after all casualties, after all destructions Russia brought to our land. So now there is no question about peace or surrendering. And I must say that there is no even the word peace in our internal discussion. We talk about victory. For us, it's very important to win this war, especially, again, after all those thousands of people put their lives, sacrificed their lives for our independence and our freedom.
What would that victory look like to you?
First of all, we would like to get back our territories. Our first step should be get back to territories before 24th of February. And then we would be ready to talk and have a diplomatic discussion on how we would regain control on occupied territories since 2014. But also, I think for many Ukrainians, it's very important to get reparations from Russia. But also, it's very important for us, basically, to bring to the Russian people the knowledge that they were wrong, that this war is like nobody wants to be under the Russian rule in Ukraine, and we want Russian people to understand this. Otherwise, if we do not change the regime and we do not change the perception of the war among Russian society, otherwise we will have this conflict and the war again and again. Russia will repeat it over and over again. So I think that it's very important for all of us to make everything possible so Russian people could go through some re-education and reconsidering what they have been done in Ukraine.
You want them to bring about regime change, do you?
Yes, of course. Yes, we would like them to do their homework and get rid of the dictator. But the problem is that the majority of Russian people support the regime, support the war. And we've been, we Ukrainians, we've been warning the West about very dangerous processes within Russian society for years. Now we see that this Leviathan, this monster, has grown up next to us with extremely nationalistic, extremely chauvinistic, racist views. And we have to do something with this.
Ukraine has lost, by your government's own admission, a fifth of your country, Up to 100 soldiers are being killed every day, some 500 wounded. What has that done to morale among the people?
You know, for us, of course, it's very devastating. It involves a lot of pain, this whole tragedy. But at the same time, it's this war. It's about our survival. We do not have other territories we can just go and occupy. This is our land. This is our home. So the morale is pretty high. Because we know what we are fighting for, and we know what Russia brings to those territories it occupies. Like now in Kherson region, where people are being tortured and killed and raped. So I would say that morale is pretty high within Ukrainian society.
The battles in the east are pretty intense at the moment. The shelling is unremitting and merciless. In your view, how critical is the situation right now? How vital is it for you to hold on, for instance, to the eastern city of Severodonetsk?
It is important because if they take these territories, it would give them opportunity to go further. And of course, they are not going to stop only on Donbass. They would go to Odessa, they would go to Kharkov again, and there is a high risk then they will attack Kyiv as well. And again, like I think it's also crucial to understand how this war looks like. Like it is very, conventional positional war. It basically brings us in its manner to not even Second World War, but the first one. Basically, it's trenches warfare where artillery plays the major roles and, killing thousands of people. So for us, it's crucial to keep the attention of the West on what is going on in the East. We keep saying, do not give up, keep your interest, keep your focus on Ukraine. Don't think that it's some, regional conflict you can easily ignore as it used to be like a few years ago. So for us, we want to prevent this Western fatigue.
If the war goes on for a prolonged period, do you trust America and Europe to keep supplying you?
Yes, we do trust. We trust our partners, and we do our best to engage more partners and get more support precisely from Central European countries, especially those who are now expressing some ideas on surrendering. We do not accept these ideas. What President Macron has said about preserving saving Putin's face or conceding territories, it's not an option for us. As I said, it's a matter of our survival. So, and all pollings shows that Ukrainians don't want to live under the Russian rule.
Macron's comments have clearly angered your government. Your foreign minister said calls to avoid humiliation of Russians can only humiliate France and every other country that would call for it. Russia humiliates itself. Do you get the impression that the West, and maybe France, Germany or Italy, those who've been pushing hardest for a ceasefire, are actually conducting negotiations behind your back without your agreement, or do you fear that they might be?
I don't think this impression that they are doing something behind our backs, but I think that they still want to pose it as diplomacy, which is not. It's not diplomacy to call the war criminal. It's not diplomacy after everything what Russian forces committed in Ukraine. So I do not think that calling or suggesting not to humiliate Putin is an option at all. Like it's not gonna help either Ukrainian people or Western people as well. And again, like we see clearly that there is a crisis of values, which is very dangerous for the Western society as well. Because if these values turns to be only declarative, and if they are not followed by actions, then it's very easy to use this by totalitarian regimes. You know, if we are so vulnerable, if everything that we fought for and believed in is not important anymore. So yes, when I say we, I mean the West, created so many institutions, you know, said so many words on liberal values and democracy, and now we see that, these values are not followed with some very concrete actions. And this is, of course, very demoralizing for Ukrainians and I believe for many Westerners as well.
But you've been quite angry with the West. You tweeted a few days ago, every time you want to bring us together, every time you want to decide for us, ask us. This simple rule would help many Western politicians not to look like imperialist idiots. Tough words. Who were you talking about?
I was talking about those officials who are suggesting us to have peace negotiations right now with Russia, who suggest us to concede territories, and who tries to show that there is a brotherhood between Ukraine and Russia, which is not true.
There's a condition attached to the aid, the military weapons that you're being given. You can only shoot at the Russians who are on your territory. You can't shoot back at them. They can destroy your towns and cities, but you can't touch theirs. Do you accept that condition willingly? And will there come a time when you won't accept it?
I think that the most important for us is to repel Russian forces from our territories. And we do everything possible. There are so many Russian troops currently in Ukraine. Yes, they do have very low morale, because we hear their interceptions, we hear their calls, what they're saying to their relatives. We see that they are not motivated at all. So our main goal right now is to get rid of Russian troops on Ukrainian land, and then we will see.
But my point is that you're fighting in a way with one hand tied behind your back, fighting against a nuclear superpower with one of the largest armed forces in the world. And the West seems to have gone along with this idea that they can hit you, but you can't hit them across the border. Are you happy with that?
I'm not happy, and I think that you will not find even one single Ukrainian who would be happy with this. That we always have so many conditions, you know, tying our hands basically. And again, let's recall what the some of Western politicians were saying just 3 months ago, that Ukraine would collapse in 3 days. But it's 104 days of resistance, and we stand firmly.
Have the Americans told you what their end game is, how they see this war going, how long they see it going? Does it worry you that the one thing that Joe Biden hasn't talked about is victory, your victory?
I didn't have any negotiations on this with Americans. I just keep hearing a lot of different versions, how long it might take, and many people are inclined to think that it's going to take maybe a year or so. But I would suggest to the US and other Western countries to finally believe in us. That's what we are doing right now. We are proving that we are capable of winning. And also there is another topic for discussion: what we will do, what the world will do with Russia if Russia will lose this war. And I think it's important to see this possible solution, that Russia will be weaker and maybe smaller, or even maybe collapsed, Yeah, I think that it's important to bring this topic on the table finally. We don't want to prove every time that we can win. We proved it already. We just need support. Ukrainian people are not asking to fight for them. As our government stated many times, give us weapons and we will handle the rest. So we need more sanctions and more weapons, and we will do the rest.
Before we leave the question of Western divisions, I just want to make the point that perhaps Putin will attempt, of course, to exploit those divisions as best he can. But isn't there a danger, in your eyes, in any case, that the longer the war drags on, the more those countries who are supplying your weapons and financing your defense will want to say in how this conflict comes to an end, even if they promise, as they have, that they will respect your decisions, whatever they are? Isn't there that danger?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The danger is there. And of course, it's in Putin's interest to sort of freeze this conflict, because then the West definitely will have this fatigue and, voters in different countries, people in different countries will ask their governments why they're paying high prices for gas and oil, for instance, or why we give so much money to Ukraine. So, of course, it is very dangerous. But again, if we are not given up, we ask you not to give up as well.
And do you fear a time when the West... Do you fear a time when the West might give up?
Some countries, yes. But again, it's crucial to understand that we are fighting not only for our land, not only for our territory, but also for the values. And these values are shared with the Western countries. And at some point, we are fighting for the West as well. And I think that if Russia finishes with us, it will move further. It will move on. And Russian propaganda machine, propaganda people and Russian officials stated it a lot of times. If you look what they are saying, you'll see that they are absolutely very aggressive towards other countries like Baltic states or Poland. But I also think that they will have to kill all of us, like all 40 million people, to occupy us.
You talked about propaganda. I want to look at this area because this is something that you've specialized in. How would you rate Ukraine's performance on the digital battlefield as opposed to the military one?
I think that Ukrainian information warriors, as we call them, are very successful. They're very united. I think it's the first time when all key actors in this area, government, civil society, and media are extremely united in their narratives and in countering disinformation. It was not like there back in 2014, 2015. Now it's changed, and a lot of people, and I keep hearing it from many colleagues, many European colleagues, that how come that your strategic communications is so good? It's just because the whole society is involved in communication. And we see a great communication coming from military, from NGOs, from the government, presidential office, first of all, the MFA. So it's all together gives this impression that, yeah, we are winning. And I think that we really won this first phase of at least information war.
You say that, but your government had to learn some lessons early on that using fake footage and creating myths that don't add up, that doesn't always help your cause, does it? I'm thinking of the so-called Ghost of Kiev story, the Ukrainian pilot who was supposed to have shot down 6 Russian fighters in the first day and a further 40 later on. Your Air Force Command had to step in and ask Ukrainians, as they put it, not to neglect the basic rules of information hygiene. Has that been respected since then, those rules?
First of all, I think that it's not right to use disinformation. This is very important. And I think that generally, if we look at how Ukraine communicates, I think we are pretty successfully follow this rule. There are some exceptions, though. And internally, we have these discussions. And believe me, our government is showing that they're capable of having lessons learned.
And they have. The Ministry of Defense has learned one as well. I mean, they put out pictures of an aerial dogfight saying it was a MiG-29 of the Air Force destroying the Su-35 of the Russian occupiers. Turned out it was from a digital simulation game. Again, that's counterproductive, isn't it?
It is, but as far as I know, they removed that video. And you can imagine how many people are involved in communication. Some of them making mistakes. It happens. And the most important part is that they removed it and they acknowledge that.
What do you imagine could possibly persuade Russia to give up the territory it's already taken, or it's taken since February the 24th?
I think that something should be changed in Russia, first of all. So it could pull their forces back, but also situation on the ground, like military situation. If they lose a lot of troops, and if their military, if their soldiers refuse to carry out orders, then of course would be a very clear signal to this local Russian administrations that they should give up.
But they're as determined to win victory as you are. They show no sign of wilting or changing their mind about that or being ready for compromises. There's no sign either that anybody else is standing in the wings, even if Putin were no longer there, that anybody different would emerge, anybody with different policies would emerge.
Yeah, but back 3 months ago, they were claiming that they were going to take Kyiv, and they failed. So I think it's mostly posturing. And we, as I said, we listened to Russian soldiers' conversations with their relatives, interceptions, and we see that the morale is very low there. And they do not see why they should fight for what they are fighting. They do not see the strategic goal. And they, again, they were told, these soldiers were told that people in Ukraine would greet them with flowers. And instead, now they come and see that everybody hates them. Everybody hates them in Ukraine. Nobody wants to accept Russian army or Russian administrations or Russia itself. So I think it's just posturing and bluffing mostly. So if they are suffered with big losses within their military, then of course they will withdraw their forces from the occupied territories.
Do you still see a future for Ukraine in the European Union?
Of course, yeah. And majority of Ukrainians, they are willing to join the European Union and NATO. And this is very important. This factor, which shouldn't be excluded, the wish, the will of Ukrainian people. And now we see that Ukrainians express their wish to join the EU.
How discouraging is it for you,
to
though?
The European family.
How discouraging is it for you? How discouraging is it for you when a French minister, Clément Beaune, said last month that Ukraine might have to wait between 15 and 20 years to join the EU? Is that typical of some of the mixed signals that you're getting from Western countries?
Very often these people are the same people who were saying that Ukraine will collapse in 3 days, back 3 months ago. So I agree, it is very demoralizing, but it is changing. And I think it's very important for our partners and allies in the West to show this coalition and to strengthen Ukrainian voice. There always be some politicians who would express something like this, either in Germany or Hungary or France. But again, it's crucial to understand what Ukrainians are fighting for. And Ukrainians are fighting for democratic values, and Ukrainians are trying to disrupt and to break this extremely bloody and authoritarian regime in Russia, which would be beneficial for all Western countries. As I said, when they finish with us, they will go further. And let's not stop them somewhere in Poland or Czech Republic. Let's stop Russians in the east of Ukraine.
Liubov Tsybulska, it's been very good to have you on Conflict Zone. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.